Hi, and welcome everybody out there to another HOFA-College studio workshop. My name is Jochen Weyer. I'm tutor and audio engineer at HOFA. I've been in the studio since a long time ago, 1994 actually. And we want to talk about a topic which I find really and quite honestly very interesting. It's reverb and spatiality, spaciousness, depth, whatever you want to call it. How to create depth in a mix and why it is necessary to create depth in a mix. However, if you have been in our studio workshops before, you probably know how it's working. The first hour is free for everybody. You can watch on YouTube. And the second half of the workshop, is for a very exclusive community only for HOFA-College students in the online campus. And we will make a break after an hour, and at 4:30 we will go on in the online campus. So, of course, this is an interactive workshop. I don't want to be the only one talking in that workshop. And you can send me your questions via the chat, YouTube chat, and later on the Vimeo chat in the online campus. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you will be creative and active in this workshop and be with me here today. So, what is it about, this workshop? Reverb. Not only reverb, but also some other effects and like delay and whatever comes to mind when it's about depth. And I want to start with the question, why is it even necessary to create depth in a mix and to use reverb? Because in a natural surrounding, nobody ever thinks of using a reverb effect and to use technical tools to create depth, because it is all around us. The reverb is actually there. And the thing is that when we started recording music a few centuries ago, that was in the beginning of the 20th century, we recorded music with normally one mic. Not we, but our predecessors did. And this is with one mic, or even two after a few centuries when stereo recordings were created. You can only record what's there. You can put the mic in front of an artist or an ensemble or an orchestra, and what you record with one mic is what the music sounds like in the room that you're recording. And after a few centuries, when multi-track recording came up and everybody was doing recordings on their own with a very close mic like we do today. When I record vocals, normally the mic is in front of the singer. And these days, there is no spatial information on a recording. Not in every case, but in most cases. When we record vocals or instruments, whatever, there's very little spatial information, spatial fractions on the recording. So, if you listen to a recording without any information of depth of the surrounding of the room you're recording in, it sounds really, really direct, and that sounds pretty unnatural. And if you have ever heard a recording without any reverb from a very dry room, or have ever been in a room that is completely dry, you know that sounds strange and weird and not good for most purposes. There are differences, of course. Many rappers still prefer a very dry sound without any reverb at all, but that's style, and that's not like a question of good or bad. So Okay, let me take a short look in the chat if there are any questions already. I'm interested in learning how to record my own IRs. Will we get there? Maybe in the second part, but it's not my my main topic of that workshop today. I'm sorry. Hope you will join us anyway, because there are interesting topics, and of course we will be talking about using IRs, impulse responses, and algorithmic reverbs on the other side, but we come later to that. I want to start with a short presentation and talk about the background of how reverb is actually created in a real surrounding, and what we can learn of that for our mixes and for our way we work with the reverb effects. So let me start my very, very sophisticated PowerPoint presentation. I'm really proud of it. So here we go. As you can see, I called it Reverb and Depth because this is a very main topic for me. Depth in a mix, dimensionality, and reverb is a part of it. Okay, so this is what we have in a room, in a real room, when we have a sound source and what we call a receiver. That can be a microphone or a listener, a real human being in a room, and we have the room, which is symbolized by the black lines. This is a square room, can be a living room, a hall, whatever. It's not. It doesn't matter how big it is in that context. And we have multicolored lines in that illustration. So we see there's a sound source, which is red, and we see a red line. And this is a very direct way the audio, the sound takes to the receiver, to the listener. And there's no going around, and it is as straight as possible. And this is the shortest way the sound can take. And of course, it takes some time depending on the size of the room, because sound is emitted via the air, and it takes some time. So you know all that. But the other lines you can see, they take longer. There are some green lines. They move from me. If I am the sound source in that context, from me come to the reflecting walls on the side, and to this table here, and to stuff like that, to the next surfaces. And after a very short time, they come to the receiver. And these reflections, these reflecting sound waves, are called early reflections. These are the very first reflections that reach the receiver, the listener, whoever, or the microphone. And the next stage of sound emission is the blue lines. These are sound waves that take longer. More reflections. They go there and up and down and back, and after a short while they reach the microphone, the listener. And during that process, of course, they grow quieter, and we can see that with the following foil screen illustration, whatever. So these are the same lines. We have the red for the direct sound, the green for the early reflections, and the blue lines for the reverb, or the tail as it is called. And the one axis is the sound pressure level in dB, and the other axis is the time in milliseconds. And as you can see, as the time passes, the lines and the level of the reflection is diminishing and is going down. And we can see the direct sound is the loudest signal, in most cases anyway. Then the reflections come after a short time, and they get quieter with as time passes. And then after some time, 30, 50 milliseconds, the early reflections are moving into the reverb tail. And what is not quite perfectly shown in this illustration, that in the end of the reverb tail, the signal gets very diffuse, and you don't see the single, and you don't hear the single reflections anymore. And of course, this is not a perfect illustration, because normally you don't hear the single reflections, because they are very close to each other. Especially in a small room, you don't hear the single reflections. In a large room, you can hear sometimes echoes or early reflections, single reflections. And what is happening here in the reverb, in the tail, that the signals and the reflections get diffused. And this is what we sometimes talk of as diffusion. And this is a very important element of a good reverb sound, diffusion. So let me check what I'm talking about in the next file. So, okay. That's interesting, because this is a way reverb was created not so long ago, like 50, 60 years ago, in the 60s of the last century. Very good and successful and still quite modern recordings have been made with these rooms. This is not a normal recording room, as you may suspect, but it is a reverb room. And I want to talk about the history of reverb and reverberation in the next few minutes. And it's quite an interesting topic, because we still use some of that stuff that we see as a real room in simulations and impulse responses these days. So this is a reverb room in a studio, and what you can see, that there are a lot of reflecting surfaces and things that make for more reflections and make for a very lively room in that case, because it's not only the size of a room that defines the reverb, but the surfaces and the form and what is in the room is also, of course, very, very important. And you can see it's hard reflecting surfaces like stone and tiles and these pillars in the room, and they make for a very lively room sound. And this room sound was triggered by the loudspeaker you can see over here, and this is a speaker, and the reflection pattern of that was recorded via microphones and then sent back to the mixing console in the studio. And this was done like on many of the first Beatles recordings in the famous Abbey Road studios, for example, and in many other rooms. Right here, Abbey Road bathroom, exactly. So this was the first way to create spaciousness and room and depth on recordings that were actually recorded for a first time very dry and with close miking. The Beatles and other bands in the 60s were experimenting a lot with different miking methods, and a lot of stuff happened in these years in the 60s and 70s. Before, as I explained before, recordings were made to be final. When you place the microphone or two microphones in front of an artist or an ensemble, the way you placed it and the position in where you put it in, that defines the sound of the recording. And when the recording was finished, the mix was finished by it. There was nothing to be done after that. And with the development of multi-track recordings, closed miking, overdub recordings, and stuff like that, it was necessary to create spatiality and spaciousness on a room, on a mix, on a recording. And because sometimes even artists started to record in different rooms and in different studios, like it's nowadays completely normal. One guy is recording in his living room, another one is recording in a big studio in a live room. The third one is using samples from different locations. And all that must be combined into one unique and homogeneous room sound. And that can only be done with artificial reverb. So what happened after that? That's been the 60s. So let's take the next one. Yeah, that was a really a huge step for mankind, maybe not, but for audio engineering at least. And these are or is a plate, a reverb plate. You probably heard it. You've seen it in your reverb unit, and maybe you have a simulation of that on your laptop, computer, wherever. This is a plate, and it may be deceiving, but it's really quite a big thing. It's like 1 meter something big, and it is a real metal plate. And this is a reverb sound that has been first used in the late 60s, I guess. And we've become so familiar with it. We've been so used to it all the last centuries because it's a part of pop culture anyway, and pop music and rock music sounding mixes. They use plate reverbs for centuries and still do, some of them. And it's a quite interesting concept, because what we've been seeing on the illustrations before, the way a sound source triggers reflections in a room can be transferred to the concept of a reverb plate. But it's not like a real room that is triggered, but it's only a two-dimensional plate. But the reflection patterns in that plate are just the same. There's a sound signal that is triggering the plate to resonate and to reverberate, and this is done by the so-called driver. And in the frame is the plate, the metal plate, can be gold or alloy or silver, whatever, and pickups like microphones, piezo pickups, record that reflections that are happening in the plate. And this is a very nice sounding reverb up to a point. It's not like it can be too loud in a mix, because if you mix it too loud, you really will hear that it's not a real room that you're listening to, but a plate, a metal plate, and it starts sounding a little bit artificial, let's call it that. But still, I'm still using plate reverbs, impulse responses, or emulations and algorithmic plates a lot these days. I still like them. So this was, let's say, 70s, something like that. Another way to create depth or reverb with hardware is this. You've probably seen it before in your guitar amp, if you have one, or where else, in some special effects hardware gadgets. But it's special, but it's nice somehow. This is not a plate, but it's still metal. It's a spring, and so this reverb is called a spring reverb, and it's it's even more simple than a plate, and it's much smaller. So the big advantage was that you can put it in a guitar amp or in an organ, for example. And some Hammond organs have these spring reverbs, and it sounds not really like a real room at all, but has a nice reverb somehow, and then it adds a really nice and special effect to some sounds, and you can use it great on solo guitars, even or especially if you have some vintage sounding guitars, or also use it on keyboard sounds, or as an effect on vocals can be cool too. So, but this was way back then, and it's still not it's not used that much anymore. So that's another thing from back then that I really like, and it's a great tool to have, whether as a real thing or as a plug-in or simulation in a mixer, whatever. This is a tape delay, of course. I guess you probably seen effects like that before. The two effects you can see here on the left side, especially the space echo, are real legends. And I remember when I started making music as a teenager, and we didn't have money for a real digital reverb unit or something like that, and we only had a space echo. No, it wasn't even a space echo. It was a dinner chord back then, and I really didn't like it because it doesn't sound like a reverb. You can use it as a reverb, but it sounds kind of cheap. But you can use it for very cool effects, and it's a great thing to have. And if you ever happen to get a real hardware unit, try it out. It's cool stuff. It's very unique. And the thing is, it's just what it says it is a tape delay. It's using like a tape machine, a tape that is running through an input amp, has different heads, like an erase head to erase what's been on the tape before, because it's running in a loop, and then one record head for the input, the incoming signal, and 3 different playback heads, and the position of the playback heads and the tape speed in which it's running defines the delay times, and you can use it completely different than a normal digital delay, and it is imperfect, and it is noisy and whatever, but it has character, and it is especially for some vintage sounding music, which is very popular these days. You can use it for a lot of tracks, not only for guitars, but for vocals, for keyboard sounds, for lead sounds, whatever. I love it still. And as I said before, if you ever happen to come across a real thing, try it out. It's worth it. So next one. Oh wow, yeah, that was another big step in history. These were the first super reverbs, digital reverbs, started with the Lexicon in the late 70s, and these were the first computers and reverb units, and these reverbs made they defined a sound. They defined what we think of as good reverbs, because especially the Lexicon reverbs, they were used on how many number one hits that we're still listening today. I mean, the 80s are as popular as never before, and the sound of the 80s was particularly created by these reverbs, not only, but to a great extent. And these were algorithmic reverbs. We will come to that later, and what a algorithmic and what a impulse response reverb is. But they were computing a reverb, and of course they needed computer power, DSPs, and the hardware, and they needed converters for the signal conversion, analog, digital, and back. And of course, this was extremely expensive these days. I remember when we first bought stuff from Lexicon and TC Electronics in the late 80s, early 90s. Wow, that was a lot of money. And the Lexicon 960, you can see here on the right side, when it came up and you wanted the full version, you would probably get a small car, well, not a really small one these days for it. And back then, audio engineering was quite an expensive hobby if you did it as a hobby, and completely different from what we have today, when we can put like a reverb unit in every channel if you want to. But these days you had like one or two different reverb machines and a delay machine and maybe a plate reverb in the next room. And that was about it. Most mixing consoles still in the 90s had like 6 or 8 effect sends in mono. The big one had maybe 12, but that was it. And still, you could do pretty good mixes these days. Okay, and what's the next step then? Ta-ta! Yeah, that's reality now. Plugins. Whatever you're using, whatever digital audio workstation you're working with, you're probably using plugins as reverb effects, or reverb effects as plugins, whatever. And there are so many different manufacturers out there. Of course, we as HOFA have our own impulse response reverb, and we have our algorithmic reverbs, but there are great other reverbs and effects out there. Use whatever you want, but use it knowingly and know what you are using. You have to understand what you're doing when you turn the knobs and when you do something on these reverbs. And that's what this workshop will be about in some parts. So let me take a look. I think I'm almost done. Right. So this is the next topic I want to talk about, and this is a very, very important topic. The way we receive spatial information in a mix. When we listen to music, especially if we listen to music with loudspeakers and not with headphones, but even with headphones, we can have a spatial impression, the illusion of depth, and we have to understand that when we listen to music, that depth is an illusion because it's not there. It's only, especially on loudspeakers, it's just there is one speaker here and one speaker here, but with headphones just the same, here and here. And I don't hear something in front of me or behind me, not unless you're using 3D audio, but that's a different topic. And how do we get the impression that there is something in between the speakers on that line, but also something behind the speakers? And it is really important to understand that it's our brain and our imagination that creates this impression of depth. It's not really there. There is nothing happening behind the loudspeakers. But we want to give the impression that there is something. And our brain makes, how can I say it in English? Our brain is putting all the information it gets together, and it hears there is a signal and there is the same signal. So both signals here, it must be in the middle, and we hear it as in the middle. And if we hear something that is quieter than the one signal that is in the middle, we think, it is quieter, so it must be farther away. Because what is happening, if we look at this illustration again, what's happening in reality when we move something back, we hear it less loud. It's what we're used to, and our brain says, okay, it's quieter, it must be farther in the background. And when I did this workshop before Corona, and we had a lot of people here in our seminary room or in the recording room, I could easily demonstrate it to the guys. But I need to ask you to imagine what is happening. Imagine yourself in a room, maybe like the one we see on. Let me go there. Come on. I go back like that. Here. If you are the receiver and you imagine the sound source like 5 meters away, and he's moving, or she's moving, the sound source, it is moving a little bit to the side, like a meter. If it's only 5 meters away, you can locate it. You can close your eyes and see it's moving from there to there. But imagine the same thing happening if the sound source is like 50 meters away. You can probably locate somewhere around there. But if it's moving a meter to the side, you don't hear it. You can't locate it. And also what's happening, it is much quieter than before. If the sound source stays as loud as it was but moves to the back, it's getting quieter. So what we have seen on the illustration before, here, it's not only moving in the background towards the rear end of the room, but it's also becoming quieter, less loud and less broad, wide, whatever, but it's moving towards a very narrow line in the end. And that's these are two very important aspects of natural depth, that signals that are in front are louder and they have a clearer location in the stereo panorama, and then signals that are in the back of the mix and in the background. So what's happening else? Next thing to understand is that in a room, when a signal is moving to the background, the fraction of reverb and the reflections that are in the room are still getting louder. The direct signal in relation to the reverb becomes quieter. So more reverb, less direct signal, and the audio source moves towards the background. I just seen a question in there that popped up that I would like to answer. But wouldn't you still be able to have extremes in stereo position in the far back, like something could be hundreds of meters away but on my hard left, and I wouldn't hear it like it's in the middle? Yeah, right. If it is 100 meters away but on the hard left, then it's 100 meters away on the left, on the right. And that is necessarily an extremely big room. And if you have a room like that is extremely large, you can do it. But you must understand that is not the way that our mixes are normally done. And if I have a room of maybe like 2 or 3 seconds reverberation time, which is a pretty large room already, and I can probably just put something like 10, 15, 20 meters away. And if it's there on the one side and I still hear the signal on the right, I still hear the reflections of the room, not only from that side, but from the whole room. And that is important to understand, that I cannot only hear the direct signal on one side with a lot of reverb, but the reverb also on the one side. That's not realistic at all. You can use it as an effect, but that's something completely different. So, panning, reverb, loudness, these are the important factors of creating depth in a mix. And another thing that is not easy to explain, especially in English, and not easy to understand for many people when they hear it for the first time. The reflections that reach our ears when we are in a real room, they come to our ear after a certain time, and we hear the direct signal, and a certain time passes, and then we hear the first reflections. This is probably not something we really think about, like, oh, I had a time gap of 15.7 milliseconds, but it is happening and it's measurable. And this time gap is called the initial time delay gap. And that is the time, I've written it down, so I'm reading it off, is a time that passes between the arrival of the direct sound and the arrival of the first strong reflection. So this time gap is something that is happening in reality. And time is something, of course, we have to deal with when we're using reverbs. And if we go back to our picture of imagining a sound source in a room, when I hear a sound source in a room that's very close, I hear the direct signal after no time at all. If it's here right in my face, there's no time delay. But if the sound source is moving back in the room, the signal itself, the direct signal, takes some time to come to me, to come to my ears. And the reverb on the other side, it always stays the same. The reverb of a room comes to me in the same time. That's however big the room is, and that what defines the reverberation time, and the pattern of the reflections, all that defines the room sound. But this reverb, this room sound, comes to my ears almost at the same time, whether the signal is standing in front of me or farther in the background. And so when I hear the direct sound source very close to me, I hear it lot earlier than the reflections. But if the sound source is moving to the back of the room, it blends with the room, and the direct source takes some time, and the reverb takes some time to come to my ears. And so the direct sound and the reverb sound, they create one room. But if it's coming closer to me again, I can hear that there is some time passing between the direct sound and the first reflections coming to me. And this is this is a delay I talked about, the time delay gap. And this delay gap is something we use in reverbs, and you've probably seen it before. There's a parameter called pre-delay, and this is kind of a simulation of this initial time delay gap. And you have to understand, if you increase this pre-delay time, the illusion is created that the signal is coming closer to you. And that is very important, because you can do a lot of stuff with these parameters, but you have to use them wisely. And yeah, I want to show you this, and I have prepared a project. I want to start right now, but I hope I could make it clear that that this pre-delay time is something that's dependent on the distance between you and the sound source. So if you imagine yourself on that triangle here, you can be in the front as a listener, and everything that's moving farther to the back is creating a distance between you, and this distance is measured in time, and that is why time is such an important factor when using reverb. So I close this one, and ta-da, there's my project. And I want to show how that delay time is defining our reception of a position in a mix. And I have prepared that example with a guitar and a voice. And yeah, I just play it for now. I have to make it louder a little bit. Now it's time for my confession. Okay, just that few notes. Okay, we hear the guitar and we hear a singer. And yeah, they're supposed to be in the same room, but the vocals are slightly in front of the guitar. Just listen to it and check out if you can hear it the same way I do. Now it's time for my confession. Okay, but the guitar is not somewhere far in the background, but it's almost as close to you as a singer. Now, this track is called Vocals Near. I would show you this signal on the other side. Vocals Far. Now it's time for my confession. I don't know whether you're listening with headphones or with the loudspeakers, but I really do hope you can hear the difference. And I think you can do, because it's really, really obvious. But I also hope you can hear the position the singer is taken. It's moving not somewhere diffuse, but it's moving from the front to the back. So again, listen when I switch from Vox Near to Vox Far. Now it's time for my confession. Now it's time for my confession.
Now it's time for my confession.
Okay, I guess you hear the difference. And so, what is happening? And why do we have the feeling that the singer is moving in the room? He's moving to the back of the room, to the rear end of the room. So, let's check it out, how it's done. So, first thing that's really important, and I guess you probably heard it, the signal is less loud, of course. So, we have this channel for the vocals near, and this one for the vocals far. Okay, this is a SSL channel, and you don't actually see in the first moment, in the first glance, what the difference is. But here, this is the level of the vocal near channel track, and this one is the level of the vocals far. So it's like this one is plus 3 dB and this one is minus 3 dB, and this 6 dB difference, and that's what we normally call like half the volume. So it's much quieter. So the difference is 6 dB in levels, and when you know it, you hear it probably even clearer.
Now it's time for my confession.
Far.
Now it's time for my confession.
Okay, but that's of course not the only difference. If we take a closer look at near and far, we can see that there are different things happening in the equalizers. So there's the same setting in the low end, and the same setting in the low mid frequencies, and nothing's happening in the high mid frequencies, and yeah, a slight boost in the high mid frequencies. But the really interesting thing is happening at here, high and low cut, and there's no high cut in the near channel, but a high cut at 4 kilohertz in the far channel. And that is really a huge difference, not only in level, but in sound, because the high frequencies are less, far less loud than on the other track. And if you hear that, and if you know that, you probably hear it better. Okay, check it out.
Now it's time for my confession.
So I just turned the guitar off.
Now it's time for my confession.
And listen to the sound, not only to the level.
Now it's time for my confession.
So the high end of that track is much quieter, and the signal is not only becoming quieter as a whole, but in the high frequencies even more so. So what else is happening? Because there's happening more than just different volume and a different EQ setting. And this is, of course, reverb and spatial information. So let's check it out. This is the vocal plate of the near channel. This one is the vocal plate of the far channel. And this one is a plate, whoops, sorry, where is it? The plate of the guitar. And you can see all three of them have the same plate. It's always the same plate, famous, and you can here see plate chamber, and nothing different, not like one reverb is much longer than the other. They have all three the same reverb. And what is the difference then between near and far? Even the guitar has the same plate. It's not like the guitar is in a different room.
Now it's time for my confession.
This is the near one.
Now it's time for my
And this is the far one. Okay, let's take a closer look at the parameters, and you can see two really big differences. And the first one that comes to mind is this one. We've been talking about. This is the pre-delay. This is 100 milliseconds, and this is quite a long pre-delay. And I will show you later how far we can go and what are good values for pre-delay. But this 100 millisecond is quite a distinct pre-delay time. So the vocal track with a closer sound is not only louder and brighter, but it also has a pre-delay time that is much longer than on the reverb with the on the far track. And the second difference that is even more important is the gain. This one has a setting of -20 dB, and this one has a setting of -10 dB. So the reverb is 10 dB louder on the channel that is supposed to be farther in the background, and it has no pre-delay. So the illusion of a position much farther in the background is created by less volume of the direct track, louder volume of the reverb track, a more muddy sound or a dull sound of the vocal track, less high frequencies, and a different pre-delay time of these of the reverb units. And all these parameters have to play together, and they affect each other. And if only one parameter is working but the others are not, you don't create an illusion of different positions in the room. So you have to be sure that when you want to place a track farther in the background, for example, than another track, it has to be quieter, it has to have more reverb, but it also has to be somewhere in the center of the stereo field. That's something that's not happening here because they are all in the center. But if you place, for example, a track, you want to have it in the background and you make it rather quiet, and you use a lot of reverb, but you also use a long pre-delay time and you make it very bright, then you have a really unnatural spatial impression and it won't work. So again, all these parameters have to work together, and they have to they have to work together for a natural and homogeneous impression. And this is what's happening here. All these 4 important parameters, and it's not only pre-delay. I came from the pre-delay, but it's not the only thing. If you're only using pre-delay in the hope you can place tracks farther in front or in the back of the mix, it won't work alone.
Now it's time for my confession. Now it's time for my confession.
But it's working. All these parameters together, and everything's moving forward and background and in the background. So, okay, let's take a look at the clock. We have a few minutes left, and I want to do something that I'm looking forward to always when I do this workshop, because it's a really, it's a nice change of perspective. Let's say it this way. And I have to start another PowerPoint presentation. All right. So just give me a second. Yeah, great title. Similarities in auditory and visual perception. And the thing is, I've been talking about close and far and room and stuff, and bright and dark and all that thing. All those things are not only parameters for music production, for mixing, but also are parameters of visual arts. If you're painting a picture or making a photography, you're also talking of bright colors and dark colors, of foreground and background, of spatial impression, of left and right. All these things are really important when you're doing visual arts. And I think when we look at pictures and try to see them with an audio engineering mind, you can you can learn something from pictures. And I want to start with the first picture. Oops, why didn't it work? Here we go. So, yeah, like that. That's one thing that's in the middle and in the center of the perspective, and that is a bird. And he's a star of this picture. And he's bright and he's centered and he's taken a lot of space in the mix. And he's clearly in the front of the mix. And everything else is completely blurred and it's completely unimportant. And it can even be that it's not nice at all. I don't know if it's a tree or a cave. And it can be anything. It doesn't matter. It's only a gray, blurry background. And that is something we can transfer to mixing. When we have something we want to really put clearly in the front of a mix, and it's the one important thing in a mix, and the background isn't as nice and as important as the one thing that's in the key interest, in the focus, then we can blur everything else. We don't have to put a lot of bright colors and definition and transparency in the background, because it's not necessary. The background is the background. It's only one thing, and it is not important to disguise all the little things out there. For some mixes, it's not. Don't do that on every mix. But if we have something like that, like a shining bird in front of the mix, a shining star, maybe a singer that is really great, and he's the one thing that people are interested in listening to, and then the background isn't important, and it can be blurry, it can be diffuse, it can be even a little bit gray. And especially we in Germany, we have a culture of mixing things like that. In the 70s, German Schlager was really the big thing here, and not for me, but for some out there. And a lot of Schlager songs were mixed like that. There was a singer, and he was a star, and the rest of the song was mixed into the background. You didn't hear whether it's two guitars and keyboards or a piano, or the complete band was like a diffuse, and it's okay like that, because the guys wanted to listen to the singer, and they were not interested if there are any background singers, and they didn't want to hear the drummer playing great stuff. They wanted to listen to the singer, and that's the way this picture looks like a German Schlager. Okay, next one. Completely different thing. Yeah, that's it's nice, but what can we learn from it for our mix? This wouldn't work on every song either, because it's like an epic and very melancholic picture, and we do not have that thing in the middle, that thing in the focus like we did have in the picture before. And I probably could imagine some movie picture soundtrack Lord of the Rings, whatever, with a lot of misty and reverb sounds and very spatial, and everything is a little bit diffuse and nothing's in front, and there's not one thing that is in the focus, but there are only gray colors here and misty sounds there, and it looks nice and has a very nice impression, but it's not focused on one thing. You can mix like that. You can do melancholic movie soundtracks and orchestral soundtracks like that. Sure, you can. Okay, now it's getting brighter. We have a lot of color in there. Okay, sorry, I was taking a look at the YouTube chat. Yeah, of course, there will be a recording of this session. Don't worry. So, this picture. It's much brighter and much clearer than the picture we've seen before. We have bright colors, green, flashy yellow, but still it's a very big picture, and it has a lot of depth, and there's something that in the foreground, but it's not really like in your face. It's not the like in the bird in the picture before. This is if we take this little house there, it's a part of the picture, but it's not the star. And the trees around the house, they are much bigger than the house, of course, but they are one background. But you can see the single trees, and you can see one yellow tree and a green tree, and it's all like one forest, and but still you can see the details. But there's something behind that, and that is what we can transfer to mixing. We have different layers of depth. We have one thing in the middle, but it's not like boing, taking all the space in the mix. We have the green pad, whatever what's the word? The meadows, right? And then we have the forest, and it's all staggered in one after the other. And behind that, there is still a lot of depth. And this depth is not precise anymore. If we take a closer look and I really focus on that, I can see, maybe there is a valley down there, and maybe there are other trees, but it's very blurry and very diffuse, and you don't see all the details. And that is what you can use, what you can do in good mixes. If you have stuff that is supposed to be in the background, don't make it too precise and make it too transparent, and you don't have to hear every detail down there, and you don't have see every leaf of every tree that's far in the background, because this is not realistic, and things that are in the back need to be blurry and diffuse, or else they will take away focus from the things that are in front of the mix. And that is especially important when you're doing big productions, like with many tracks and many informations and many layers of spatial positioning. And keep in mind that you have to use hierarchies, I call it normally. In a mix, you have to define which instrument or which track, which vocals are in the front of the mix, and which are in the middle somewhere, and which elements are very, very far in the back. And that is those instruments in the background, they have to be blurry. They have to be a little bit gray and less bright and less colorful and less precise than those instruments in the front. Okay, I think I still have another picture. Yeah, I have two actually. I love it. This is my bad example for a mix. And I have heard a lot of mixes that sound like this picture looks. I have no idea what's in the focus. I have no idea what this picture is about. Is it about the sky, the grass, the house on the left, on the right side, the tower on the left side, or this little hut out there? I have no idea. It's completely unclear what this picture is about. And unfortunately, there are many mixes that sound like that, with no focus on a leading instrument and no clear definition of front and background. It's completely has no depth at all. Somebody said it's still a wonderful picture. Yeah, because the place is wonderful. I've been there myself, and it's nice. It's nice out there. It's you can hear the sea rolling and the wind blowing, and you see the blue skies. It's nice out there, but still the picture is not good. And if you're doing a mix like that, the mix won't sound good. And that's my last picture. And I have a good example, and this is this one. I love this picture. Really, it's great. I even don't know who did this picture, and I don't know who this guy is. I hope he's not looking and feeling himself ashamed, but it's a wonderful picture, and it has everything that a good picture has to have, and it has a nice atmosphere. It has a clear focus, even if it's originally only a small picture, and I zoomed it up, and it's not even a good JPEG quality, but still, you can see what's in the center, but you can also see what's in the background, and it has a nice depth. Things that are farther away in the back are more diffuse, but you can still see what it is, and the different layers, they are really, really clear and defined. And when you look at the books in the front, you can even read the titles, but only when you look at when you take a closer look. And at the first glance, it's only the guy you see. At the second glance, you think, oh, there's a library and there are books. And then you see that the books in the back are blurry, but they still give that atmosphere. And it's completely round. It's there's no flaw in this picture. It's for me it's like a perfect mix supposed to be, with a key focus and a clear focus on one thing, but still things that are happening around this focus are very nice and interesting too. And it has a really nice depth without being huge. It's only like 3 or 4 or 5 meters that we look at. And it's colorful, but it's all the colors fit together. Nothing's looking out of space and out of position. It's round. It's completely perfect for me. So, perfect timing, I would say. With this picture, I would close the first part of this workshop session today. It's 10 minutes past 4. I would say goodbye to everybody who was looking on YouTube, and hello again to everybody who's looking in the online campus in 20 minutes. I hope you enjoyed the workshop so far. Would love to see you back there in 20 minutes. Have a nice break and see you soon. Bye bye.